Hey Rob, good to see you again as always. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking a bit of time out to come and have a chat with us. Let me start this discussion by asking you, what is it that running a business is hard work. It's a tough gig. It has lots of ups, lots of downs, lots of challenges. What is it that gets you up in the morning, day in, day out, to keep plugging away? I mean, let's start with your motivation. Tell us about that.
Um, great question, Paul. Thank you for having me once again on your podcast. I really appreciate it. I guess what motivates me is, number one, I'm in the right industry. I'm very passionate about what I do. We're going through right now a what I would call probably the most significant technological revolution of our time,
Agreed.
certainly my time.
Yeah.
And having and gaining access to the types of tools and the various things that we do really motivates me, really excites me. At the same time, it also scares me in a bit because we're working with significant components that have significant consequences on our client base and the folks that rely on our programming. But at the same time, it's very exciting. It's very exciting stuff. It leads to a lot of long hours, and as we work our way through that program. But in general, you've got to be passionate about what you do, and I really love my job. But you've got sort of all these colliding forces at play with AI and all the various things that are impacting and changing really the landscape of how we work. We went through a significant landscape change during the pandemic. Everybody started, working from home and changed a lot of various dynamics around that. Now you have more AI-enabled type of activities going on that do that. And probably the last part of that question that I would say is, working with smaller teams on a global basis are things that require various strange or off hours, right?
Yeah.
Hours that you wouldn't normally be accustomed to if you were just working within one time zone or two time zones. But I've got to sort of stretch myself a little bit thin sometimes, working both ends of various time zones. So yeah, just making sure that everything still runs, it's smooth, is a challenge.
Sure.
Right, that gets me out of bed. So there's two things that get me out of bed, I guess. One is I'm passionate about what I do, and the other one is I'm also passionate about making sure nothing goes off rail, if you will.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Sure. I
Yeah.
mean, you've touched on that thing about things kind of going off rail, to use your phrase. I mean, let's just talk about risk. I mean, you've got a business, in that covers a big chunk of the planet. I mean, just tell us, how do you think about risk in that context? I mean, we were just talking before we came on about some of the challenges you have with clients and the decisions that they make and the impact that that has. I mean, what's your take on thinking about risk? Because obviously you help clients with kind of cybersecurity risk, but what's your thinking about risk in your business as you're building it? I mean, just give us your thoughts on that.
Um, one of the biggest things that I always try to input or plug into, every work stream or every component, whether that's here in the Americas or elsewhere, is identifying what are the single points of failure. So when you're working with high performance teams or smaller high performance teams on a global basis, you've always got to consider, what is my single point of failure, right? What is my single thread that could break the program, break the cycle, break all the various things that we're involved in, and ensuring that we have fallback, we have how would that thing be addressed, that particular risk. It's just simple risk management, right? But when you're covering different time zones and you have, for example, a leader in one area. Let's just take, for example, we have three platforms that we operate from. that our customers rely on day in and day out. The product managers for each one of those platforms lives in different time zones. So they are the subject matter experts around that. But if you've got an issue at what would be their 3 a.m., right? How do you address that if he's asleep? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've got all these sort of issues, and it could, of course, we put in redundancy. We put in all these various components to try to address those at what would be his 3 a.m. But if it rises to the occasion of something that would be like a level 3 issue or component like that, how do you address that with the secondary or even the third level of backup resourcing and that? So those are the things that are incredibly challenging, Paul, and require a certain amount of input, especially with the work that we do, which is so highly specialized. It's not that simple to get folks that operate at that level of technical deepness, right?
Mm.
And back to my earlier comments, you're talking about um, tools and knowledge that didn't exist 3 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
It's
there's not
changing really rapidly, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And so, when you try to build not only two levels or even three levels of redundancy, so you don't have that single point of failure, you don't have that single thread that could break, you've really got to think through, do I have enough capacity to ensure that there's a smooth transition when something doesn't work? So that's one of the things that keeps me up at night,
I'm sure. I'm sure.
as opposed to waking up, right? Back to your earlier question, it keeps me up, making sure that those pieces are there. So there's a smooth handoff, right? Where,
Yeah.
a problem percolates, you move on to the next guy or the next guy, and you've got enough transitioning in there in components that folks haven't even heard of, right? Some of these tools that are available today and things that we're working with that input into our supply chain and programs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting that you use the phrase single point of contact.
Mhm.
And most people think about risk and they think about, well, this is a risk and that's a risk. So just, I mean, your thinking is slightly different around that, isn't it? I mean, just explain to me what you mean by that and why do you approach it in a slightly different way to the kind of conventional thinking about risk?
Well, in conventional risk management, you basically set up, you identify what all your risks are,
Mm.
and then you set up this sort of stair step, program around, plugging in redundancies and fallback measures and all these various things that you would in any responsible risk management plan. But when you're dealing with significantly high tech that is relatively new, um, you've only got one or two folks that can respond to something that can
Yeah.
answer that,
Okay.
right? And these are not things that you can create systemic backups or have. We do all that. So, for example, in our systems, right, we have everything mirrored, right? We have one system that looks like the other system. The physical or the computer parts of that are simple to address. That's actually gotten better as years have gone by. But human resource, human capital
Yeah.
is something that you almost develop that IP in-house. You do develop it in-house because again, this is not something you can go out on a job board and advertise. I'm looking for an individual that has these capabilities and expect you'll get a million responses, but they're not going to be the person you're looking for. I've always used this phrase that um, when you sharpen these guys around a certain IP, your resources, your human capital. When you sharpen them around a certain IP, especially now that the IP is so new and the capabilities and the nuances are so new, it's almost like you develop a purple squirrel in the forest. If that,
Yeah.
and how do you replace that rarity? How do you replace that?
Yeah.
And so when you think through the redundancies, you've got to have a really fantastic program in place where you're considering what happens when something doesn't go right
Yeah.
or go as expected, and that resource or resource pool is otherwise not available,
Yeah.
right?
And presumably, one of the issues is about how quickly you need to respond. I mean, what was going through my mind as you were speaking was, not only is it very complex, but it's also, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, it seems to me to be changing really quickly. So there's two things. One is about the complexity, and two is the pace of change. And I'm a my experience is that when things change quickly and there's a lot of complexity, there's lots of opportunities for things to go wrong. I mean, so how do you keep track of that mentally?
It one well, I'm a big fan of keeping stuff off of computers, and I think I told you, at one point that
Mm.
I actually, and people are surprised that I do this, that I keep everything in a journal.
Yeah, yeah,
Somebody operating in high tech, and they're keeping stuff tracked in journals, offline journals. But you've got certain levels of things that are critical. You've got to keep track of those things. Make sure that that all the various pieces or components of that could go wrong or addressed, especially with human capital, right? That it's just so critical right now. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, there was a notice that went out from all the international agencies regarding a new type of cyber tactic that is incredibly effective for cyber criminals or threat actors. And here in the U.S., we actually classified it as a national security threat.
right.
And when I looked at what they were doing and how they were doing it, I was very intrigued. It's a very complex system, how they're doing this, and I don't want to get into tactics or anything like that. But the we put our two best guys on this, and they literally just turned this on, the detection of that. They turned that capability on just last night, right? And the very first thing that came to my mind is, how do I build, again, redundancy around it? How do I address, because it's probably going to get targeted,
Yeah,
but there's all these nuances, that we had to deal with when you're inside of this particular industry. But who do I call? It's all the same questions, right? Who do I call? How do I address this? The client calls. You got to build out all that scaffolding, right? Around how do you deliver this commercially to the client,
yeah,
and how do you support it when you're working with a very small group of very talented, high-performing individuals that deliver this. And at the end of the day, look, those guys have families. They have,
yeah, yeah.
they've got weekends. They have, so but I'm not saying it's impossible. It's very difficult
Sure, sure.
to create those redundancies.
And I
Yeah.
mean, you touched on your team. I mean, that's the other interesting thing about this, what's happening at the moment is, small teams building big global footprints. I mean, how do you keep your team firstly focused on the right things? How do you help them perform at an optimum level? And how do you deal with, when stuff goes wrong? I mean, there's a lot of challenges there around that team. I mean, just give us your insights, your thoughts in about those sorts of issues.
Yeah, it's even more challenging, I would say, Paul, because of the nature of the location of our R&D team. They're spread out throughout Europe and Asia, and so you've got all sorts of time zone issues, and even when we deal with bits that We don't need that highly specialized experience and levels of capability that we have with our R&D team. We try to find folks that are inputter, contributors, influencers into the process that are in a more neutral time zone. So, which is a challenge in itself, right? So not only
Yeah.
are you looking for a purple squirrel, you're looking for a purple squirrel in a certain forest only, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So and it seems like for us, it's Europe is the best place to look at the guys the guys and gals in the middle, right? That are servicing, right? And I'll just give you a practical example. Let's say that we need to develop a certain capability, and the product manager for that would own that capability or that for that particular product happens to be in Singapore, right?
Okay.
And that's a completely other side of the world time zone for us here in the U.S. Right. So it just makes more sense for us to try to find the person that's going to provide those services to him or her in Singapore in a more friendly time zone, right?
Yeah.
Which adds another set of challenges, right? And again, even though they don't need to have that very high level or deep level of knowledge around what they're doing, and the easiest example I could give you is something like building a couple of screens on a website, right? You don't need for that. There's millions of folks that can do that, right? But again, and then it brings in the whole, do you trust these guys? They're going to have access to very sensitive stuff, So working within a lot of various time zones can be challenging, and it's another big area for us of concern and making sure that we have at least it covers a good chunk of their window
Yeah.
that they're around,
And
and being able,
I mean, I can see the problem. You've got a team that's spread all over the planet. You've got to match people with the support mechanisms that they need, and that's spread all over the place. And then there's you as the CEO. I mean, there's only one of you. I mean, how do you work through that process? I mean, how do you keep yourself focused? How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep yourself effective in that context? Because that can't. I mean, my reading of that is that it can't be easy.
no, it's not at all. The good news is that I've got a fantastic leadership team.
Right.
So in many, a lot of times I can offload some of the commercial stuff, right? And to our COO, I got a fantastic COO and account managers and whatnot that work through. The issue that I deal with is the temptation of spending a little too much time on the innovative R&D side of the house,
Yeah.
and not enough on the commercial side. And it's something that has always been a problem for me. I really take pride in what we do, and sometimes I get a little bit too involved with what the R&D guys are doing or the development team, and it takes away from the commercial. But sometimes I don't have a choice. It has to be a certain way, right? And when you're working with very technical individuals, they don't understand the commercial side of it. So you need to liaise that, right? Between the leadership vision of what we're trying to achieve. What does this thing need to look like? How does it need to operate? What problems are we trying to solve specifically? And help the R&D, help dev in another, all over the world really, to connect those dots,
Yeah.
right? So they don't go and build something that's super specialized for a particular thing when it could overlap and provide value in other areas that they're not necessarily thinking about. And it kind of speaks to, I think, where you were going with that earlier with uh, you know keeping the communication flow going. It's happened more times than I can think of it just in the 5 years or so since we started Beacon, but where we have a very competitive team working on one platform, another competitive team working on their platform. And, if you don't have that input, if you're not in there looking at what they're doing,
Yeah.
they'll end up overlapping or spending resource time building something that's already been addressed in one of the other components. So that communication is vital
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
when you're communicating. And we, um, we have communication platforms that we utilize that where we post all the various programs that we're involved in. And if there's cross-platform components that are vital, that there's no overlap, right? Then we'll post those in there and we'll make sure that everybody's aware, signs off. Don't go here. This is being addressed here. But it can be difficult. It's certainly
Sure.
challenging.
I
You've
mean,
got these guys that are very competitive, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that was actually I was trying to get at was this idea that it's the match, if you like, between the capabilities of your business and the demands of the market. And the thing is really interesting at the moment is how quickly that changes. Customer expectations change. I mean, in your game, the kind of threat changes rapidly. The thing that I was getting at was how do you keep those things in balance? How do you make sure that the capabilities of your business are matched with the way the market's changing? It seems to me that that's a really difficult and dynamic challenge. I mean, it probably changes pretty much every day, I would have thought. I mean, how do you keep those things rolling forward in a way that doesn't stress everyone out?
Yeah, it's we do a lot of groupthink, think tanks, if you will. Our leadership is always listening to what is happening. And back to that example just a couple of weeks ago with that particular advisory that went out. Um, I was so busy with other stuff. I didn't even realize it until that evening. And then my COO flicked me the advisory, and he said, "Are you aware of this? And maybe we need to focus on this."
Hmm.
So we've got these sort of very robust communication between leadership,
Yeah,
right? And it's not just about innovation. There's a competitive part of it, right? And,
yeah,
I've I've been going with certain uh, uh, features that we advertise when we have sales presentations or speaking engagements and things like that that I talk about. Um, when I talk about our competitors, I'll say, look, they don't have this capability, right? We do. And, I'll find out 2 weeks later, now they have that capability, right?
yeah, yeah.
So, I was like, maybe I'm not going to start saying anything anymore. But and because they can, because they also have access to some of this next generation tooling and this era of AI where
Yeah.
you can develop a capability in days that
And
back yeah
the other
for,
thing that's interesting about your world is that often, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my reading of your world is that you often end up talking to customers when things have gone wrong. I mean, to come back to the example we were talking about before we started this
yeah
discussion, I mean,
yeah
a client doesn't do something, they then get hacked, they then come to you and say help. So in one
right
sense, you're talking to them after the event, which
right
so that in itself presents a slightly different challenge. In most businesses, you're talking to customers on an ongoing basis, or when you're trying to sell them something, or when you're trying to upgrade a piece of technology or something. I get the impression in your world that often it's a kind of a distress call that you get from customers, which I guess makes it difficult to get a sense of their day to day challenges because you're just dealing with them when they're in a hole
yeah
and want help to get out of it.
yeah and we're probably extremely unique in that area, right? When you think about it, from other types of verticals or
Mm,
businesses that are operating globally, um, because there's so many external forces, so many things that are going on. Yes, we get that call. we also, because we have in our system, we have various things, signals we call them that can tell us when something, when cyber criminals are talking about a certain target, right?
Okay.
Uh, and we've made those calls in the past at a larger scale. I'm talking about very large entities, even a major telco in Europe. Um, and we've said, we need to have a call. We'd like to have a call with you, and we'd like to show you something, right? That might be of interest to you. Sometimes we're doing it more as a community thing because we see
Mm.
the rise of signals, if you will, and and then they'll say, "Oh, we can give you 30 minutes in 6 weeks," right? Or
Yeah.
they look at it as if it's guys, I'm trying to help you.
Yeah.
And it's happened twice with two multinationals just in the last few months, right? Where we had significant, strong knowledge within our systems that chatter in the dark web, for example, right? That these things were happening. Folks were trying to buy credentials. Bad actors were trying to buy, they're trying to buy certain things, and what they're doing is they're building scaffolds to commence an attack, and it's you don't get a response, and then oh, we'll get around to that. There's no priority placed on it. I don't think folks are realizing how critical the situation is
Yeah.
right now
Mm.
with this, because guess what, they got the AI too. It's not just us,
Yeah.
right? There some of these things that we're looking at are so sophisticated that it's incredible that they have this capability, and
Mm.
the only reason they do is because of AI. It's 100%. There's no doubt. So dealing with customers, right? The ones that have it worse is not necessarily us because we're the factory, right? We develop and build the software. We make sure it gets to our partners, and then our partners are the ones that engage more with the clients than we do. But there's still that education, that all these various things that go into the entire sales cycle, where and we're fine tuning our messaging as we go, but there needs to be a way for folks to understand that this is a different world we're operating in.
Yeah.
This is
And it's
not
changing. It's changing really
every
quickly.
day. It's so fluid.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just incredible.
Yeah.
And every year, unfortunately, I make a prediction that this year is going to be worse than last year, and every year it's correct.
Yeah. Which
In
is rather
terms of
depressing. That's pretty depressing, really, isn't it?
it is.
Let me
It
ask
is.
you. Sorry, just to take a step back for. I mean, just to go back to when you started the business, which I know is a few years back now. I mean, when was the moment that you felt, yeah, this is something that we can take global, or was it, if you like, born global? I mean, there's that kind of dialogue at the moment about businesses that are born to be global players. I mean, did you set it up and then think we can take it global, or did you think this is born global, and why? Why?
Cyber is a global problem.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, if we were having this conversation 10, 15 years ago, right? We wouldn't have started the way that we started today, right? We would have probably started regionally, or maybe even in state, right? So here in the U.S., probably would have focused on our home state or our headquarters state, right? And grown the business conventionally that way. But because of the access that we have to highly skilled labor all over the world at competitive rates, versus operating solely here in the US or in
Mm.
Europe, and being able to reward these guys at significant levels that they wouldn't get in their home countries. It enables us to operate globally,
Mm.
right? And not only do so with phenomenal labor, that it opens up that door for us. That's on the human capital side. On the side of of tooling capability. We're living in the cloud era now, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everything that you do with a few keystrokes, you can replicate that across region. I mean, what all of our programs are geo-redundant. So, Europe, Asia, the Americas. So, literally with a few keystrokes, you can replicate your entire program, and
Yeah.
gain access to,
And
to
on
other markets. Yeah.
and on that
Yeah.
point, I mean, I mean, conventional wisdom, if you're running a perhaps a physical product business, is that you would say, okay, well, we're going to go into Latin America and we're going to need to
Yeah.
partner up with some distributors, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, do you think about market entry in that way? Or do you simply follow where the clients want to go? I mean,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
does your market entry process work, if you like?
Yeah, yes. If you're operating with obviously with physical or manufactured products, something like that, that's a whole other ballgame. But there are components to that do still ring true,
Right.
right? When operating globally in various markets, like for example, in Latin America, which is a very tough market to operate in. There, for various reasons, but we've done particularly well there, and it's just because cybercrime is very high in that part of the world. Security defenses are immature, but the issue that we have in market entry is that you still have to have somebody to have face time with the client during the sales cycles,
Yeah.
to go through the education process, right? Well, what does this particular tool do for me that my 20-year-old antivirus that I've still been renewing contracts on it doesn't do, right? It takes time. Obviously, we don't have that kind of feet on the ground, if you will, internally. So we use agents and we use channel partners, right?
Yeah.
In that part of the world. So there is still a little bit of a hybrid there, even though you folks say, oh yeah, but you can just go and log into the portal and send in a purchase order. It's not that simple, right? To when you're commercializing, and your go-to-market has to be highly channel centric. If you're choosing a region, like for example, we just opened up Thailand recently. We had to spend a lot of time. I had to go out there. We had to look at and talk to various partners or potential partners, and ensure that we had the right partners there, that could service the Thai market, and have that face time with their clients and develop the
And
relationships and the
and
real.
and how much? I mean, I mean, one of the interesting things about this kind of a model is that it's more dependent on partners than you perhaps imagine. How do you go about finding the right partners? Because I'm a huge believer that if you can find the right partner, things go really well. If you get the wrong partner,
Yeah,
it's a
extremely well.
recipe for disaster, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you work out who the right partners are? I mean, do you have a process for that? Do you have a perspective on that?
We have a very robust partner program, and
Right.
our partner program is based on capability, and not just technical capability, sales capability, obviously. It doesn't take us long to vet a partner. We usually have the way that we do it is first we do a discovery. So, back to Thailand, we participated in a large cyber show there, and which was really geared a lot towards partners and or what we call MSSP, security practitioner providers, right? Sorry. Um, and while we were there, we met maybe 20 or so that had a high degree of interest in our programs and our platforms. And then from there, we whittled that down to about five, right? Five or six that, a lot of it was just us on the back end checking out you know, their websites, their capabilities. Are they
Mm.
certified in this, certified in that? All these various things. You look at that. You look at some other intel that we have access to, regarding their turnover and capability, how long they've been around. And then after that, it goes into more of a one-to-one interactive where we're talking to them, we're sharing certain ideas with them, just seeing how they react. right, to that. And then once we get to that sweet spot where we think, these guys with a little bit of training could really get us where we need to go. So there is a pretty robust filtration program and whatnot that we go through. And our partners are multi-level. If they reach they could have capability all the way at the platinum level right from the beginning, right? So there's huge security providers that are familiar with a lot of stuff that we do. And then there's the ones that are very promising, right? They've got a great customer base, but they just haven't quite transitioned yet to
Yeah.
next generation, right? We'll still bring them in because they have a tremendous Rolodex and sales capability. But we'll invest the time. We'll invest the time to train them to get them up to speed.
Mm.
So there's a little bit of all that, but yeah, you're spot on. These guys are the guys in the trenches,
Mm.
that'll get the sale made, booked. More
It's
importantly,
critical to get them to
supported,
do right, isn't it?
supported, supported, right? Because again, back to my 3 a.m. Analogy, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to be taking that call, and being able to spread that out as well on the day-to-day stuff, which is significant. We don't do the level one or level two stuff. It's the partners do that for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and just well, as we draw this to a close, there's a couple of questions I wanted to ask about your experiences in terms of what you've learned because you've been on a journey. I mean, it's a really interesting area there. The kind of cybersecurity area is something that's evolving really fast. My guess is AI is making it even more challenging in that space now because the nature of the threats will be evolving faster. I mean, when you look back on the journey, what would you say you've learned from that? And perhaps if you were starting again, what would you do differently?
I don't know if I would do any, just to answer those in reverse order. I don't know if I would do anything differently, Paul. Obviously, there's always continuous improvement, right? The We have benefited from many things that our competitors didn't benefit from because they started 10 years ago or 8 years ago, as crazy as that sounds. With our most popular platform, for example. We just coded that 2 years ago,
Mm.
and it's much easier to um, correct that, to fix it with the tools that it was built upon, as opposed to those that built their tools or competitive
So
tools
you
six
haven't
years
got a
ago.
legacy holding you back.
No, no, and you've heard me mention this before. Everything is talent today. It's
Mm.
having high performance teams. I can't literally say anything any more graceful about our team. They're just an incredible team. Like everyone else, you get a bad egg every once, it comes through. But it's being able to identify talent, building strong, cohesive communication channels and teams that hold it together. Is what's really the secret sauce. This is my 35th year in IT. I switched to cyber 15 years ago, and are specialized more in cyber than anything else.
And
Um,
what made you switch to cyber? What is it in particular that interested you about cyber?
it, what was interesting is, at the time, and this predates the beginning of the ransomware era, right? So
Mm.
Petya, not Petya, those types of attacks that really started to wake people up in 2014, 15. What really interested me about it, and said, this is an area that I want to make a transition into now, um, was what I did prior. Prior to that, I was doing business analytics, BI, and business intelligence tooling. And when I looked at it, and it said, "My Lord, we're being entrusted with some very sensitive data." When
Yeah.
you think about,
Yeah.
trying to find an extra shilling, if you will, in the supply chain, and to do that, you have to string together, orchestrate a tremendous amount of very sensitive data.
Yeah.
That when I looked at what we had capable or what our capabilities were in 2005, 2008, it was incredibly immature for the need. So again, this is before we even knew this was going to be what it is today, anywhere near. I said, wow, and there was a lot of schools of thought. There was a school of thought that it just came out of Lockheed Martin, and then later with McLean, Virginia, and some folks in Israel as well. We're looking at a new way of thinking about this called adversarial behavior modeling.
Right.
It's basically attack yourself so you know how your defenses are.
Okay.
And that started this whole new paradigm shift. And there weren't a lot of takers, I'll tell you that in the beginning.
Mm.
But I drank that Kool-Aid and I loved it. And I said, you know what, this is what I need to be doing the rest of my career.
Mm.
Did all the usual stuff, as you start to specialize, and got all the certifications and whatnot to go with it. And I tell you what, it's probably the best decision I've made in my career, because it's back to your opening comments, about what I love what I do.
Mm.
You have to love what you
That
do.
comes across, Rob, that you love it.
Yeah,
I mean, we've talked about this on a number of occasions, and
yeah,
that
yeah,
certainly comes across, which I guess is, I mean, I always think if people enjoy what they do, they're more likely to be successful. So that might be part of the reason that you've been so successful, I suppose.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you for taking a bit of time out to come and have a chat with us. I mean, that's fascinating, really. I mean, it's a really interesting proposition, a really interesting journey that you've been on. And I mean, and I know you want to conquer the rest of the world. I mean, there's not much left now to go at, but I'm sure it'll keep you occupied for a year or two. So Rob, good luck going forward. It's been great to hear about it.
Thank you. Thank you. We don't want to conquer the world. We want to help the world. And that's something that we hope to do, and we aim to do with all of our programs, whatever part of the world they may be in. But thank you, Paul. I really appreciate you taking it as well, and being on your program. And we're always here for you. Thank you.
Good stuff. Good to speak to you, Rob. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.